Hello besties, how are we doing on this fine day? Are you doing good? Great, that's awesome. And if not, I hope it gets 1,000 times better. Now today, my friends, I want to talk about the guy who didn't like musicals. The guy who didn't like, I was about to start singing it, I was like, okay. We're gonna be talking about the guy who didn't like musicals, and specifically Paul, the main character in the show. More specifically, spoiler warning, the last two songs, Let It Out and Inevitable. So if you have not watched the show, go watch it on YouTube. I'll probably link it down below. Go watch it. It's great. And I think you should definitely watch that before if you choose to watch this again. Also, I'm going to be doing my makeup because I have class soon and I don't have time to just film at this moment in my life. So let's discuss it. So recently just been re-listening to Let It Out and Inevitable over and over and over again. And that is not because I think it's the best songs in the show, or the ones I enjoy listening to the most. Musically. If you, I really love Gnaw Your Seed. That's probably one of my favorites, or if I thought about it more, I could put more, but that's just the one that comes to my head. Let's start with Let It Out. It's so fascinating to me from a writing standpoint and just thematically. I think about this all the time. I've had so many discussions about it with my girlfriend. It is just such a fascinating concept to me that I literally just keep listening to it. It's because of the thought experiment it is. Now, if you did not heed my previous warning, quick summary. I don't have a lot of time to film this today. Basically, the guy who didn't like musicals is about it's about a guy who didn't like musicals, right? But it's more than that. Spoiler warning, great story short, it is about this town Hatchetfield, and specifically this main character, Paul, and he doesn't like musicals. But this town gets hit by a meteor, and it starts taking over this town with a hive mind, and the hive mind makes everyone sing like it's a musical. And the story ends, much like all of the Hatchetfield trilogy, with tragedy, where everyone in the town gets consumed by this hive mind. And Paul, which is so fascinating because to me he's such a compelling main character, not even because of his dialogue, not even just because of, I love Paul and I think he's so silly, the scenario he's in, he's pretty basic, but his story is so compelling because he is so relatable, and the scenario he's put in just brings out this interesting story within him, which is very sad because we'll get to that. Now, Paul is not happy, I would argue. When he started to do the show, he works for I'm assuming some sort of business, and he's just no, he seems to have coworkers, but he doesn't really talk about his relations besides he has this crush that he hasn't even really confronted yet that works at the coffee shop basically down the street. And so every day he sneaks out, not sneaks, but he's like, okay guys, coffee break, I'll go get us coffee, and so he can talk to his crush. And and early in the show, when the hive mind starts taking over, his boss calls him into his office, and they do the twist on the what do you want song, and Paul's like, I don't know, money, very relatable answer. But it's also so tragic because he doesn't seem to have, besides the basic aspirations of safety and comfort and happiness, he has no complicated desires or wishes. He's just kind of being pushed and pulled through life. Yeah, he kind of goes for Emma, but before the musical even starts, it doesn't even seem like he really tried to pursue Emma. He talks to her and he goes, he's at the coffee shop, but until the musical starts, it doesn't really seem like they have much interaction. And so yeah, when the I Don't Want It song happens, then the boss says what he wants, and he starts going like, okay, what's going on? And and slowly he goes la 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 la, speed up a little bit. He's realizing that like everyone is like singing, and he goes to Emma, his like one connection that he really seems to, besides maybe his friend Bill, but he's like, Emma, everyone is singing. It's about, and she's like, okay, and she's like, no, you gotta think about the implications. The implications. My favorite moment, I quote it all the time. You gotta think about the implications. It's so good. And I didn't even realize how true it is until like how like important that line is until funny enough, I started thinking about the implications, because the horror of this musical, like when you first watch it, you're just like, oh haha silly, and it's just trying to be oh haha silly, right? And then there's like definitely some like deeper themes, but the more I thought about it, funny enough, the more I realized like how horrifying it is, specifically for Paul, because it just seems so silly. Let it out at the end. Chaos ensues, and Paul very heroically kind of sacrifices himself to like try to take down this hive mind, and it starts infecting him, and he has like this battle kind of where he's like being like slowly consumed by this hive mind, and he's like trying to fight against it. Like literally the last line we hear out of him, probably like last line he ever spoke was, I don't like musicals. We discussed it, it kind of builds upon it more in an interval, because like think of Let It Out is like kind of like, it's like, no, but not that I want to, but like, no, I don't want myself, but like, oh, like what, like I'm feeling this like rhythm, like I'm feeling this like connection to this thing bigger than myself. Like it's not even that he's like trying to, but he's just like, his brain is, however, the goop is getting to him. He's getting gooped, guys. He's getting gooped. And so Let It Out is just this like, it's so fantastic because it brings upon this really interesting question of, I know we've seen infections before, but I've never seen it, I guess, in this way, because it's so multiple thoughts. I've never seen it, well, I'm sure I have, but like I can't think of an example off the top of my head where it's like this corruption of the victim is such an antithesis of everything the character has been built upon. It's about the guy who doesn't like musicals. It's basically his one defining character trait besides maybe liking Emma is he doesn't like musicals, right? And he's being forced into this musical, and it's horrifying. It's second thought on Let It Out is it's, if you think about it, it's so terrifying, but it's like framed as like kind of like not happy song, because there is some like da-da-dance, but it's like da-da-da-da, like he's like starts like smiling because this like hive mind is like taking over him, and it just really brings upon the interestingness. English major time. Not really. Friends, this is me at a later date and time. I don't think I properly spoke to what I was trying to say here. It brings upon the interesting moral question of, should you be true to yourself or should you be happy? Because if Paul was fully, you could make an argument, if Paul is fully taken in by this hive mind, he would be much happier than he was like at the start of the musical and any point of the musical. He would be pursuing things, he would be doing things that would fill people with joy. However, it would be a complete desecration of his character. And it just brings that, I just love this question of, should you be happy or should you be yourself? And it's just so good, guys. You'll get it, like I get it. Yeah, you do. That's why you're watching this, but it's just like, this is my Roman Empire. I think about it all the time. of inevitable. And let's, I keep saying that wrong. Inevitable. There we go. I think that's better. The guy who doesn't like musicals, I'm obsessed with it because it is actually so terrifying. But it's not considered a horror at all. Because it's just more of a horror of implications rather than like gore. And it just makes it, to me, so fascinating to think about. So it starts off, remember Emma? They've bonded throughout the show. They're gonna be in love forever, and I love them so much. They're such an important thing, so Paul and Emma. And it really starts with Paul singing to Emma. Emma, I'm not gonna sing too much. I'm sorry you lost, because she is the last person in Hatchetfield, the town, that is not seemingly corrupted by this hive mind. And the fact that her like biggest connection right now is just being like, ladies and gentlemen, we got him. The line that I think is probably what I put in the thumbnail of this that makes it so interesting is, let's read Paul's little verse here. Before I had no ambition, but now my life is a song. I'm happy. Don't you want to see me happy? Is it so tragically wrong? What if the only choice is you have to sing to survive? I want to make a 3-hour-long video dissecting this, but I really gotta stay on track, besties. But this melts my brain in such a specific way. It's such an interesting thought experiment to me. So let's break it down in a somewhat concise way. Like we established before, Paul, he just was kind of being like drifted through life. But now, in a weird sense, he's happy. He's smiling. He has this sense of camaraderie. He's enjoying it. And then now Paul, in a way, he's talking to Emma, but he's talking to the audience, like in kind of like a, don't you want to see me happy? Is it so tragically wrong? It's making us question, is this a tragedy? Is what happening to Paul wrong? You as the audience, you like Paul, you love Paul at this point. Don't you want to see Paul happy? But you know, as the audience member, Paul isn't himself. He is just this piece, this pawn of this like chess game of this hive mind. He's not Paul, but he's happy. And it brings down this really interesting question. What is more important? Happiness, joy, survival, or individuality? Paul beforehand, he wasn't with peace and love. He wasn't anything crazy. He wasn't anything special. He was just a guy. Worked in a business, had a crush on the coffee shop lady, you know. But now he's part of this like bigger force, this bigger entity. And he's happy. He's singing, he's dancing. Like in any other musical, like him singing and dancing with a smile would show that he's like, that's like the ending, right? But in this musical, them all singing at the end with a smile shows that they lost. And it's just so interesting to me. And then it goes kind of on to like, oh my god, I can't think of the word, but when they like kind of like cycle through all the songs I mentioned in the musical, and he's like calling back to like all the happy memories we had. And there's this really interesting theory in the community that like the guy who doesn't like musicals is just like Hatchetfield, just playing over and over and over again like what occurred. Like in this theory, Emma isn't even Emma. She's just like playing like Emma's fear, like this hive mind. And my personal headcanon, I love this theory. I think it's delicious. The first, to me in my brain, like the first time you watch it happen, like first time you watch the musical, like that's like is the first time it happened. But then like every time you go and rewatch it, it's just like Hatchetfield like replaying itself for the audience entertainment. It makes it really grim to watch it again, but I think that it makes it I think it's interesting. And then there's also this other thing, because like kind of Emma doesn't start like really screaming until Paul starts doing show stopping number, because Paul wasn't like, all the other songs Paul was there for, but not that one. So like Emma was like, oh my god, like, yeah, you're cooked, because you weren't even there for that. You're part of the hind mind. And then it kind of goes later to like a bigger thing. It kind of getting away from Paul, but Paul goes, what if I told you a story, how the world became peaceful and just? It was inevitable, inevitable, inevitable. Like, and then kind of on a grander scales bring upon this theme again, is all of our individuality more important than like the world being quote unquote happy and peaceful? And I think really depending on where you're from, like that has a different answer. Like I'm an American, so we have a more individualistic culture, but I imagine probably if you're from more of a collectivist culture, then no, because individualistic cultures are like, I'm me, freedom, First Amendment, yep, yep. That's great and all, and because that's honestly the answer I lead towards. But if you're from maybe a more collectivist culture where they're like more like, okay, I'm just a piece and I want to work to do something greater for everyone, then maybe that answer isn't so simple for you. And I just really love how this brings up this really interesting thought experiment of, should I be happy that Paul in a way is happier now? He's found an ambition. He's found his want song. And it's tragically wrong that through this takeover, like Paul got closer to his other want, Emma. Like even before he was taken over, like because of the hive mind, he spent time with her, he got to know her, he bonded with her. They, I would argue, fell in love, right? Worded myself poorly again, so guess who's back? Back again. Also doing this right before I leave for class. What I was trying to say is that I don't have an answer for you, and nor I don't think you'll have a direct answer. Like, what is a better option? There'll be one that you lean towards, definitely. Like I was talking about, like different cultures kind of value different things. However, it's a thought experiment. It's one of those philosophical questions where there's not an answer. And I think even with the ending of the musical, it doesn't even give you a direct answer. It just kind of, the event occurred and now we're all just like left watching like the crumbs of what occurred. Like obviously like we didn't write it, so we don't have control, but we, the audience, the people in Hatchetfield, there's no control in that part. No matter like what you want, like it was inevitable. Like they were all going to be end up to doom this way because that was their fate. And now we're just left to ponder, like, is this better? It's existential, but I think that's why it's great. And then with the mix of like the eldritch horror you see through like the other the rest of the Hatchetfield tragedy, I think it's just so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. Thank you. I just think it's such an interesting thing to ponder. I like listening to these songs on repeat all the time, being like, this is so tragically interesting. And let's say we bring up Emma too. Like, Emma's the last survivor. And I think the reason that Emma being the last survivor is so interesting as well, because at the start of, I mentioned she worked in the coffee shop, right? Start of the musical, she was working in this coffee shop. In this coffee shop, like even before all this hive mind bullshit, like the coffee shop forced her to sing. And because it was run by a bunch of like theater kids, which I think is so funny. And she hated it, and she was like, I'm gonna quit and go to Starbucks. Ew, Starbucks, but it's okay. That was different feelings at the time. So in a way, and Emma was working at a coffee shop because her sister died, and she like tried to come back to Hatchetfield to like connect with that in a sense, because she was off like enjoying her life. She like, in a way, she went off to, I think it was like Guatemala, and she was like, just like, she didn't really find a place, and she just went and explored, and then she came back here and she had dreams. She was in community college and she was being forced to sing, forced to do what this bigger entity wanted her to do. And that's just what happened again, but in a grander scale. Not before, just capitalism was forcing her to sing, but now this hive mind taking over is forcing her to sing. Like, she's just doomed to be a victim, an unwilling victim of these bear conglomerates. And I think that Emma and Paul together is so interesting, and I just love their pairing, because I think together they like bring out something deeper within either of them. Like, it's, of course, Paul just had like kind of like a schoolboy crush on her, but like when they like talk, they really form like a deep connection. And I think Emma sees something greater than Paul sees in himself. And the fact that Paul at the end who announces the loss to Emma just makes it even more tragic. And if we could go through every character, like I mentioned, Not Your Seed is probably one of my favorites from this musical, so maybe I'll do a different video about my bestie Bill and his daughter. But this is just what I've been hyperfixating on. And I would just love to hear your thoughts, because once again, this isn't super in-depth, but I really enjoy this musical and this like concept, and I'm so fascinated to hear, what do you think? I'm fascinated to hear, is your individuality more important than like the quote-unquote greater good? Is Paul happy now? I would argue no. I'm so fascinated to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for your time. Let me know if you want me to make more Star Kid videos. I love Star Kid a lot. Thank you, girlfriend, for introducing me to Star Kid. Because I would love to kind of break it down on a smaller scale. I've seen a lot of great videos of people breaking down the musical by musical, but I want to kind of dive into more like specific moments for shorter videos, because that's what I've been enjoying making recently. Once again, thank you so much for your time. Have a fantastic day, and I'm sorry you lost. Bye.